Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Dude Sitting in Heaven or Another Right Room. This is Michael Levin again. This is part two of our podcast. Michael, if you want to say something so the camera can
Yeah,
see you.
I mean, my claim to fame is president of Philosophy Club. That is why you have asked me here for a second time, I believe. Or I was just so charismatic the first
You
time,
you
you
blew
know.
my socks off the first time with
Yeah,
your
I do
the
that
charm.
sometimes. I need to learn to dial it back.
Yeah, I was gonna say all the women watching the show have just been raving
No.
about this Michael guy. You know what I mean? So I had to get you on for another. So breaks in the views.
I I don't know about that, man.
No, first off, it feels so good to say this is the second time having a conversation. You know what I mean? It's like bringing back the fan favorite, Michael Levin. It is really interesting. My grandma actually had a lot of kudos to say to you. She said that
Aw,
you would have been her friend in college, and she said
that's sweet.
that like you were the kind of people that she hung around and wants to hang around with. So
Man, give me your
uh,
number. I can make more
that's what I was
friends.
saying. The
That's,
women were clamoring for you, man. You got my grandma.
I mean, yeah, I think that's the thing is like I got wisdom with that. I
Mm-hmm.
get experience with that. I have so many stories I can get from friends like that. College kids, they don't know what they're talking about
Yeah,
ever.
the
But
grandmas are really
specifically your grandma,
yeah. Noni, where you at? You watching this other episode?
I am flattered. That
Yeah,
is awesome.
I know. I figured you'd get a kick out of that. That's
Yeah,
good. But yeah, we haven't talked in a minute. I've been meaning to go to some philosophy club meetings, but
that's all right.
as you know, actually most of my recordings are on Thursdays for this
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's kind of the day. Originally, I wanted it to be Wednesday, but now it's Thursday. So but I'll be there. Don't worry. I love the emails though. The emails actually make me laugh.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, there are
I
some.
try. I
The
try.
voting one. Voting one made me laugh. The You're
Oh.
saying like I'm not gonna be your mom, or like I'm not here to I'm not here to put my views on you, but
I'm not here like to tell you to vote because I'm not your mom, but vote. Do
yeah,
it.
yeah. And it's like this isn't because what did you say? This isn't because it's the democratic way to go. This is because I am your king or
I
something.
am the philosophy king
Yeah,
and my word is law.
yeah.
And
That's
so
what you
when I say
said.
vote, you vote.
Yeah, you don't ask why.
Yeah,
When I say
yeah.
jump, you vote how high. When I
Yeah,
say
that's the
vote, you say
thing.
for
Is
who.
like in Australia, they have mandatory voting. Everybody has to vote, and it's because of their Australian king who declared that all Australians must vote, and
If it
divine.
works for them,
Yeah, no,
then
it,
works
it
for
worked
Philosophy Club.
exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I've been reading your emails, and I figure, I think the best part about, having conversations with you is that you send me the topics every week for podcast conversations.
Ugh,
You
I
send me exactly what I need to ask you about.
I should be like I should be getting paid.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
the
This is free content. I
Whatever
don't.
revenue this podcast gets, I should get a cut.
I will give you the 2 cents. I like metaphorically and literally, I will give you the 2 cents
Oh
that you
man,
deserve.
I'm gonna be making the big bucks
Yeah,
soon.
yeah. Maybe by the end of the year, you will get a quarter of a dollar. You know, we'll
That is
see.
the American
Yeah,
dream.
that's what it is. I pioneered from the beginning, so I can make 4 cents and give it to you.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, how first off, how has Philosophy Club been going?
It's going great. We've been having some excellent discussions with some new people.
I'm sure they all came from your podcast episode.
Yeah, no, every single one. I don't actually know if because I put it out, so I know one person saw it.
Hey, dude, that's
Um,
one more.
but yeah, no, that's like an infinite increase from zero,
It's
I think. So I think I'm doing
yeah,
pretty
you're like
well.
tripling, doubling my numbers. Just
Yeah,
yeah,
really.
yeah. So your actually episode did really well. I think you're at like 80, which is
Oh,
easily the second highest. So
I don't know 80 people. That's
yeah,
weird.
yeah, you're welcome for
Putting me on the map.
yeah, yeah, no.
Man, I thought you were paying me, but really I'm in your debt.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. I'm just waiting for the day. I'm just gonna keep having you on here until someone goes to the philosophy club meeting and says, I'm here because of the podcast.
that will be my proudest day.
Yeah. That'll be our proudest day.
We did this
The
together.
second I can get somebody to talk about the podcast without me involved, that's when I win.
Yeah,
That's when I'm done.
this
That's when
is the goal, and
I
then
stop recording.
you pack up shop and
Yeah,
turn the lights out. You're
get
out.
out of
Yeah.
here. Yeah. I mean, there are a few other things I wanted to talk about before we get into some of these topics.
Okay.
That I did some light stalking on your sheet again, just to revamp myself on what I
Cool.
was looking at. Um, what is it with bouldering and philosophy people?
I don't know.
Have you
I
do you
have.
know an association with that?
So, okay, I know one person who's fairly active on the Philosophy Club Discord, who is also fairly active on the Mountain Climbing Club Discord.
Okay.
Um, I don't know. I guess people who like walk around and camp in nature need to
Also,
fill their time somehow, so
I'm
they read philosophy.
yeah, I'm trying to think of. I'm trying
That's
to.
not right.
The only step that I think is missing is like marijuana, and it's like
Oh,
yeah, there's like the rock climbing, philosophy, and then weed, and that's like
see, no, this is the connecting dot because like
Colorado.
when I started climbing was when I started taking edibles. So I think there's either you start with climbing and then that uh, good marijuana gets into your system and you start
The devil's lettuce.
philosophizing,
Yeah,
or the other way
that's what
around.
I'm thinking.
Either way, it's the catalyst for all
Chicken or
things.
egg. It's like philosophy or weed. Which one starts happening first?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, I'm
I
starting.
I really don't know.
Yeah,
I do like intuitively, it's kind of like you get to the top of the mountain, you start thinking about life. Maybe. Other than
yeah.
that, I have no clue.
You know, honestly, you're making points that I hadn't even thought about. The only reason why I brought it up is because my philosophy teacher, who I'm every day I'm trying to work up the
Biggs?
courage. Yep.
Yep. I
Yep.
I have climbed with him before. He's
Wow.
awesome. He's so good. He's so good.
He's tall and he's like a
Yeah.
built kind of good
Yeah.
look built dude.
I saw him, and this will mean nothing for most people, but I saw him like doing I think it was a V6 or a V7, which is just incredible.
Did he do it?
Yeah, and he was
Wow.
like, he was talking to me about it, and he's like, oh yeah, it's all height. It's not all height.
No,
He's good.
yeah,
He's really
he's just
good.
trying to humble himself.
Yeah.
Every day I'm trying to work up the courage to ask him to be on the podcast.
You absolutely should if you get the chance. Him and Rand Paul are like the best podcast
I keep hearing
material.
about Rand Paul.
Yeah,
I
he's
think you are
awesome.
not the only person that I've heard about him
I
from.
mean, the more I can talk about him, the better every day.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, they're both great, and I'm totally okay with becoming irrelevant on your podcast
If
by
it
you
means
getting a actual philosophy professor. But he's incredibly smart. He does a lot of work with um, cognitive stuff, so theory of the mind and all of that. I'm actually taking his minds, brains, and computers class right now, which is an amazing class.
wow, yeah.
Um, yeah, he's great. So
Yeah.
absolutely get him to come on the podcast and talk about philosophy while you both climb.
Yeah.
That would be
That would be an interesting episode.
you would get at least one view, and I will
You
watch
will
that
you will
over
be
and
the
over
view. Yeah.
again.
Yeah. No, I'll have to reach out to him and then I think I might have to do smaller fish first and
Okay.
do bigs first and then do
Yeah.
and do Rand Paul because I've actually never personally met him. I want to um
Yeah.
just because
Yeah.
I mean
Yeah.
obviously I like doing this.
Yeah.
I think the thing I'm most scared of is that like I'll have him on here and then I just like sit and listen for an hour, which would be awesome for me, You know what I mean? But like from his perspective, I don't know how interested he'd be in like going and just
Talking.
talking with a
He's
student he doesn't have a
very good
class
at
with.
because we've had him talk with philosophy club before. So that type of conversation style, he's super into that. He likes talking about kind of not surprisingly stuff that isn't part of his living. So like he's very much into the philosophy of physics and metaphysic theory, but like he loves talking about moral theory just because he doesn't know as much about it, but he knows more than almost everybody about it because
Well, that
he's
that's
just
the
awesome.
biggest flex. Like
Yeah,
his side piece is the one that he knows the most that
exactly.
he knows the most about.
Yeah. Yeah, but like please make me irrelevant. I want to
Yeah,
see that
yeah.
episode.
I'll make that my next mention because I asked Dr. Robert Hessling.
Okay.
He's my psychology. He was like Psych 101 undergraduate programs
Mhm.
leader, like a bunch of just kind of easier psych classes, but he's like this like old nerd. He's like the biggest nerd and he will unapologetically play a video game trailer for 5 minutes for the whole class for no reason.
I love those
He'll try to
teachers.
worm it into it and it's like I want to talk to him. And I asked him and then he said he was too busy.
Oh, that's a shame.
Oh, I'm not upset about it or anything.
Yeah,
It's
well,
just
like I did hear you crying before we started
you
the
know
episode, and
it
I didn't know what it was
that
about,
was
but
probably
like,
my laugh sounds a lot like my cry,
oh
so I was
yeah,
probably laughing at something
sure,
hilarious that
sure,
I said.
yeah, laughing so hard with all the tears is just
Yeah, yeah,
streaming
I was
down.
cry laughing is what I was
Yeah, yeah,
doing.
yeah, that's normal.
But so you've been having some philosophy club meetings, and I think what I want to do is I want to try to emulate so I have the list of topics here that you've done in the last couple. I have the receipts.
Okay.
Um, that you've done these lessons, and I kind of want to emulate what it would be like, what the discussion is kind of like when you're talking about one of these things.
Yeah.
And so, were you the moderator for most of these, or did you get like a teacher to come and talk about these things?
So for most of the meetings, there are no professors. That's usually like a special thing. So yeah, um, I think we have a public relations officer who when he comes to club, he's pretty good about trying to keep us on topic and moderating. When he's not there, I usually do it.
Okay, okay.
So usually for the most part, I don't need to do anything. I'm honestly part of the problem sometimes, but
Okay. Hey, dude,
yeah.
that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So, as far as the topics, you guys, it was zombies, which sounded
Yep,
interesting.
yep.
AI art,
Okay.
which also I wasn't interested in it until I read the questions that you had put on there, which I think is a fantastic idea. Of like, here's the topic, here's some questions to get your
Yeah.
guys' ball rolling there. Lying, which I think we'll talk about,
Okay.
and then realism versus anti-realism, which I'm not super familiar with
Yeah.
the vocabulary, but I think I can kind of
Yeah,
put a
yeah,
ball
yeah.
to it. The questions helped with that one too.
I like that's the best part though is that was our last one and I do want to say our treasurer TJ, he's so well read. He's so well read and he's so knowledgeable and he's graduating this semester and we're going to miss him, but like I didn't know how little I knew about moral realism until I
Until
talked
he
to him
started.
about it.
And so, did you talk to him before you had that,
No, no, no,
or was
no.
that
Like
during
he
or
was
after?
teaching all of us so much cool stuff. It was great.
I actually do have a question before we get in talking about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Just like a personal, like, how much do you think, how important do you think like the literature is and your baseline vocabulary knowledge or just like historical knowledge? How much do you think that plays into being able to have a
Yeah.
discussion about philosophy?
Historical knowledge is probably not very important. It's just I like the stories. I like the context. Um which I guess context can be important, but usually it's not. Um as for vocabulary, if you want to have extensive conversations about philosophy with other people who are knowledgeable in philosophy, it's pretty important just so that you're on the same page. Although it gets tricky because there are a lot of philosophical terms that mean different things depending on the context. Um, and what was the other one? It was
Those are the two.
Okay,
Like
cool.
what like how important would you say those are?
Yeah, but like in the types of conversations that we have in philosophy club, I usually try to make it so that neither are needed. And when we want to use vocabulary just for the conversation, we'll try and like explain this term, what it means, moving on.
Okay, so you guys are. I mean, you're pretty. And then are you on a personal level? Are you like pretty? Do
I'd
you
like
try to
to
do
think
that?
so. I'd like, in the grand scheme of things, I know nothing about philosophy, but I'd like to think I know the vocabulary. I'm at least somewhat comfortable with the vocabulary.
Okay,
We'll put
yeah,
it that way.
yeah. And but are how would you feel about like grasping the concepts then?
Yeah. So
Unrelated to
grasping the
the.
concepts is everything. So that's what we're here to do is grasp the concepts and then using that understanding try and find some sort of truth in the matter. Um, so like that just comes from debate. When one person doesn't have an understanding of a concept, then the discussion doesn't really go forward.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people when they talk about listening, they say like repeat what somebody said,
Mhm.
or like if you
Mhm.
want to advance in a conversation, like say
Yeah.
like let me understand your point. You said this,
Yeah.
and so it's
Yeah.
like I was just trying to gauge like how you felt about that,
Mhm.
just because I think it's interesting one, and then you kind of have a lot of people who will have a conversation and they'll either over explain or under explain
Yeah.
certain concepts, and then some
Sure.
people just don't get it. Some people like get it and are
It's
leaving other people
such a
behind,
tricky
and it's
thing,
yeah.
but I'd like to hope we strike a good balance.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And as long as you're just everyone's like aware of it, like
Right.
that's all that you need.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I think that's all that anybody would ask is just
Yeah.
being aware. Because some people just you ask them to get into like a philosophical mindset, and they're just like, I don't get it. Why does this matter? And it's like, okay, like I understand the question, and you're valid for having that question, but that's the
That's a
point.
different
Yeah,
conversation.
like
Um,
that's a different philosophical thing. We're talking
exactly.
about why we can't name this
Sure.
glob of glue the same thing when it's heated and when
Yeah.
it's not. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, it's just stuff like that. You know, in some of my philosophy classes, I'll have people who will like raise their hand and like
Yeah.
they'll disrupt the conversation just to ask like, I don't get it because this doesn't work.
Well,
And it's
yeah.
like you need it, and that's why I think Big specifically does a really good job of just like well, like in just explaining it. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, okay, so like this is what we're doing. Like we know that this is a really silly for a normal person this is a silly conversation to
Sure.
have, but for a philosopher this is like fine dining.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? So
exactly. Yeah, parsing through because that's the thing. We have common parlance. We have common usage of all of these words, and so we can understand each other when we're talking. Um, but like, do we know what we're saying in a lot of these cases? And so, getting to that is sometimes important, and you get lost in the forest of knowledge and just uh, um,
do you know
yeah,
who Jordan Peterson is?
I know of him. Yeah,
Yeah, he's more famous now for politics than what he was famous
he
for,
was a
which is a
psychologist, right?
psychologist. Yep, he
Yeah.
was a psychologist and he did a lot of philosophy too.
Okay.
Just I think it's mostly just the way he speaks and the way he goes with things. It's
Mm.
a lot more wordy and historical
Yeah.
route than most psychologists take. But he has an issue with once he gets thinking, he jumps from point to point,
Hmm.
and then like he uses a bunch of like big words and then starts defining the words that he's using.
Yeah.
So you've asked him a question, and 25 minutes later, he's nowhere nearer to answering the question than before he started talking.
Right.
And so
That can be fun
oh,
sometimes, but like,
it definitely makes you feel like the smartest being in the universe when you're listening to him, and you're like, yeah, I understand what he's
but
saying.
then when you try and repeat it back, it's like, well, go watch this hour-long
Yeah,
video
yeah, it's
and
like,
it'll all make
yeah,
sense.
you spent 30 minutes listening to it, and like, what did he just say? Like, oh, he just said Pinocchio is like a bad film, and then and it's like that's like it. It took you 30 seconds to say
Now
what
this is
the
important, Jordan Peterson. The Tom Hanks version or the OG Disney
Yeah,
version?
he was
Or
talking about the O. He wasn't saying it was a bad film. He's talking about like all of the subliminal messaging and like all of the meanings of like specific
okay, sure,
moments and
sure, sure.
like basically saying like this represents like this represents like communist Russia in like the
Uh,
60s, and he makes really good points, but like I said,
I'm
it's so
pretty sure it
long-winded
came
and
out before the
convoluted. Or
60s.
just I think he's talking about the
Yeah, no,
original
no.
story like written down or whatever, and then
I
like the
see, I
movie.
see.
But
Okay, okay, okay. Sure.
yeah,
Um,
he's very profound, but what it just reminded me of,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
sometimes what conversations can be like where
Right.
some people just,
Yeah.
they can't do it. But
Speaking of,
yes. So as far as the topic that I wanted to talk about, I think the ones that I was most interested in were the voting one.
okay.
I'm very curious as to how that transpires. Just like what do you guys talk? Because I saw the questions and I thought that those were like really good questions. And then the AI art one. Let's start with the AI art one
Okay.
because that's something I have not thought about that.
Yeah.
So what were some of the questions? Do you remember some of the questions that you sent out in the email?
One of them was like what is art, what is creativity, and I think one of them was the um societal impact of AI created art. Um I don't I don't recall any of the other ones though.
Yeah, I think the one that I'm thinking of was at what point do we call well is what an AI makes art, and at what point of AI making art do we stop calling it art, or
Right.
do we start calling it art? Like
Yeah.
where's that line? Because
Mhm.
AI already makes art, and it's weird even reading
Yeah, so I guess
it.
I'll ask what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think. Well, with the AI, I mean, first we have to say like what art is.
Okay.
Um, I'd say, geez, because we also have to say, we have to say what AI is too. But I'd say, from first impressions, without thinking about it too hard,
Mhm.
I would say that I don't think AI can create art.
Okay.
I'd say that creating an AI that creates art is art, but I wouldn't say that the art that the AI creates is art.
Can I ask why you think that?
Um, like I said, haven't put a ton of thought to it, but
Yeah.
just first off, I'd say that art is has to have a meaning to the person um, who made it, and
Okay.
so
Yeah. This is good.
that's where like the meaning of like an AI. It's like an AI can have a program that gives it meaning, but I don't believe that an AI can have what we'd consider meaning.
So I I like this. I personally try and skirt around this um by poking at that type of definition of art. I've had this conversation with my friend um, for a couple months now, and it's the difference between art uh, being this thing that happens in the creator versus art being this thing that happens in the perceiver. So when we say like create art, you can say stuff like making creative decisions. So like deciding to do one thing over another um, in this something or other weird mechanism. Um, but ultimately, what I think is it comes down to the artist makes decisions based on this like qualitative feeling of art, this impact that it has on them, this uh, awe, feeling of beauty, feeling of something or other. We can, it's kind of in that way like redness. So I see red, I see the qualitative thing that is redness. Um, and that experience of redness is what we call qualia. Um, and so what I would pose is that art is kind of the same way, where the essence of art comes from this qualitative artness. So when I see a painting that's beautiful, I feel this artness. I can kind of, it is a little bit similar to I know it when I see it, but more so like more a little more dramatic than that. So it conjures these emotions, makes me feel awe, makes me like think of beauty or something like that. And so the only difference becomes putting that onto the creator. So the creator feels these feelings and makes art from that, and that's what makes it art, is the creator feeling those feelings and making the art. Or it could be um, the perceiver perceiving the art piece and saying, that is art. Like I feel artness and that imbues it for me that it's art. So for somebody else, it might not be art. It doesn't give them that artness feeling. But for you, that is art. Um, and so it becomes this more subjective thing. Whereas like somebody who has a creator mentality for it would say the Mona Lisa is still art even if there's no humans on Earth. Whereas somebody more of a subjectivist would say, no, it requires somebody to feel that artness for that to be art to them at that time. Um, I would say for me, it gets at what art is better to put it on the perceiver. Um, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to have the creator, to give the creator more power in making art um, because both entities have the same artness, the same feeling. Um, and so going back to AI art, this would be the thing is like AI can create art if we're looking at it from a subjectivist point of view, because obviously, if an AI creates something and that gives you that artness feeling, then that is art to you at that time. Um, Whereas if you look at it from a creative standpoint, it's probably going to be no, debatably, depending on what we mean by AI. So, like, whether or not AI can actually make those creative choices, whether or not an AI can actually possibly feel those artistic qualitative things. Um, yeah. So,
Yeah, I I definitely agree with all of the grounds that you have set, that it pretty much boils down to whether or not it's the perceiver who perceives the art or if it's the person who creates it.
mhm.
And then you had said that I think the point where I respectfully disagree is the
You can
yeah, yeah,
unrespectfully disagree
yeah,
if you
yeah,
want.
the point where I disrespectfully
Please,
yeah,
yes, okay.
but I think where I think is you had said in there that the creator, when they create art, they feel that artness when they create it, same as, and they're the same type of being that also perceives that artness. So but I do think that there are some things that are perceived as art that were not created with that artness
Yep.
in mind.
So that's the thing is like I would say if somebody has this artness qualia while looking at a waterfall, then that waterfall is art to them at that moment. So
But
yeah.
okay. Well, what I'm oh, like in nature,
So
like
yeah,
nature
no
being art.
no no expressive creator created that waterfall, and therefore that waterfall is art to them.
Yeah, and I guess that does make sense, but I think when you go into the vocabulary of saying like AI creating art,
Hmm.
it I guess when you think of art in the terms of like being created, like
That's a good point.
that's kind of where like when you vocalize it saying like this is AI creating art and now
Hmm.
art can be created,
Yeah.
and it's like there's natural art, and then some people could say God created that waterfall, and that and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
God's art.
yeah. But that's a really good point, and that kind of goes into whether or not AI can be creative.
Yep, yep. And
Yeah.
I think I think as of now we're not quite at a point. I think we're getting close, but from all the AI art that I've seen personally, it feels like it's other art combined to. Well, I guess
Well, let's
that
back
is
it
art.
up.
Yeah,
Let's
I
back it up.
get.
When you create the beautiful art pieces that I know you create,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
No photos, but
you,
yeah.
what um, what makes the choices that you make creative?
um, just imperfection mostly.
Imperfection. What do you mean by that?
Like my inability to do something specific and then my workaround for it. So like how do I emulate something that I want without being able to do it directly? So I'm not well, first off I'm colorblind.
Okay.
So when it comes to colors, I have to just kind of like eyeball it. And so it's like when that sky is no longer proper sky color, that was kind of my workaround. And knowing my personal limits, that's kind of where creativity comes.
So if somebody were to synthesize a piece of music exactly how they wanted it to be, that wouldn't be creativity.
I mean,
Because we
you,
can do that.
yeah, I'd say like to an extent they'd be making those noises out of their mouth to, um, well, because they didn't, I guess, yeah,
So they're on a computer, they're making music on what's it called?
like
The app,
Ableton or something,
something
like,
like
yeah,
that. GarageBand or something.
yeah, yeah, GarageBand, yeah.
Um yeah, and every choice is deliberate. They could make one choice over another, but they know exactly what they want. And at the end of it, they say to themselves, I have made every choice perfectly the way that I wanted it to. You're saying then they were never being creative. At no step in the process were they being creative.
Um, I think the colorblind example was a bad example. Try to think because with music, it's a whole it's a whole new idea. Um, I'd say that it wouldn't work. That idea of creativity wouldn't work
Yeah,
in like
so
pretty much a lot of cases.
okay.
Like my idea of creativity would not work in a lot of cases. So I'd
So
have to
can
try to find
we
a new
yeah,
definition for creativity then.
yeah. So can we generalize it a little bit more?
Yeah, creativity. What would you say?
Um, well, what we talked about in the club was this um this idea of thought. So, you are confronted with two options, and you are able to consider the options. You can think and reflect on each of the two and anticipate the um, the
Result.
artistic, yeah, the result, the artistic uh, consequences of each one, what it will look like, what it will sound like, something like that. and choose one. And so a lot of people with that type of definition, it seems pretty clear that that excludes AI, at least right now. So AI doesn't has this ability to take two options and pick one over another, maybe even consider. So like using some sort of weighted system, it can consider it. But there's no reflectiveness. There's no awareness.
Like this worked better than
Yeah,
something
it's
else, or
it's merely following the
the
weights.
algorithm. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And so the argument becomes further, potentially that's how our minds work. Maybe not as expressively. It's probably far more complicated than just we pick the weights. But considering our minds are just a bunch of brain states, it's a meshy goo of electrons firing. Um, when we are confronted with two choices and we reflect and we consider, it very well could be this very complicated dance of weights being considered in our minds. Not necessarily saying that's the case, but if we're going to be deterministic, if we're going to say we don't have this hard definition of free will, it might make sense then to say,
I think a lot of science backs up the kind of idea that our brains are very algorithmic,
mhm,
like based, more complicated, but similar than a computer, or similar to a computer, in that it's mostly just weights and scales
yeah.
based on like past experiences, like a ton of other things.
And so in that case, yeah, um, it goes back the other way where, well, it seems like AI can be at least as creative as we can be. Um, and that's tough. That's a tough one because that does go into what is thought?
Yeah.
What does it mean to reflect? Um, but yeah, that's ultimately kind of where we were settling on, um, is we have this thing. We have this extra thing that we think that computers don't have, which is kind of this conscious, this kind of self awareness, this ability to think reflectively. And it's intuitive to think that AI doesn't have that. And it's probably true that AI doesn't have that to the extent that we do. Whether or not it's true that they have that, it's just
It's really
dim.
just how fast. Well, I think a bigger thing is like we have similar things, but the brain kind of has like the speed of it. It has learning capabilities, and
Possibly.
then there's well, I don't know where we're at now, but I think the brain is still faster, much faster than
Oh,
a
sure.
computer. So it's I think it's mostly like
Whether or not the speed is the express reason. So, a part of this thing that we're kind of talking about, which is called functionalism. So, functionalism is basically, and Biggs can tell you all about it when you have him on your show. Um, Functionalism is this theory in psychology and philosophy that the mind, so the feeling of pain, the artness, redness, the expressive nature of the mind is a bunch of brain states. Um, and they can be boiled down to the brain state. So like I can point to a brain state and
by
say that
brain.
that is
What do you
pain.
mean specifically by brain state? Because I'm filling
So
in blanks, and I just want to make sure I have.
yeah, it gets more mathematical than I think it needs to. So when you think about the brain as a piece of meat, it's a bunch of proteins and electrons and synapses and whatnot. And if you freeze the brain in time, um, and analyze every single part of that, like I punch you in the face again. And
Yeah, good call. Good callback.
um, I punch you in the face. I and I take this snapshot of the brain. I can say it's more complicated than this because there is a time element, but I can say that that snapshot is pain. That is what it is to feel pain, is to
Those
be in that
activated
brain state.
areas, like that feeling, that
Right,
emotion, like okay.
right. And so that's the default position of psychology. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as the psychology
Sounds about
major,
right,
right.
yeah.
So that's like taken for granted in the same way something like physicalism that uh, w- um, that the only fundamental thing is physic is the physical world is taken for granted in physics. So in the same way functionalism is taken for granted in psychology, it's just assumed. Um, and if functionalism is correct, then it should go that something with this sort of ability to like have a system of states. So like an AI or a thermometer even would be conscious. Maybe not as conscious, but they have some sort of consciousness to them. That system of states would have that ability. And so AI in that case should very well have the ability of being reflective and having thoughts in a different way than we do, but with the same overarching idea being the same.
Yeah, I think what the difference then, or the thing that I'm thinking of, is that like AI was created by something else, whereas unrelated to having to have been raised and nurtured, but like your brain would grow on its own and be able to perform those actions, maybe not well,
So
but
when you
perform those
say
actions.
on your own, because I can think of maybe an AI that works on this kind of evolutionary structure where it um, puts weights on things on its own. Like, what when you say on its own, like the brain grows and develops on its own, if that's true, it seems just as true that an AI would be able to do the same.
Yeah, if if it hadn't initially been started, if what
Are
would
we
it
not
evolve?
initially started?
Y- y- That is, yeah, yeah. By technicality, then it'd be like, who's the
Well,
first one? But
let's technicality or not.
yeah, that is a good point. We are
Like,
started from
are you saying
embryo.
humanity
I was
or
thinking,
just any
I was
person?
thinking any person, but like that is true. We had
Yeah,
to have been started by
right.
another, by from scratch. But
Sure.
I mean, even humanity. But it's pretty. We don't know exactly how
Yeah.
that all shaked out because we
Well,
evolved from
looking,
something that should have been nothing, and so to say that AI could not do the same
I'm pretty
would be
sure that science actually figured that one out, and it is indeed magic.
yes. I did
Yeah.
read that on my onion on the onion. They were saying something about
That's the only news I read.
science books thrown out for magic books.
Um, yeah. Uh,
Yeah,
I like
oh.
to think of like a Supreme Court case where instead of it being like, um, I don't want evolution taught in this school, it's like, I don't want magic being taught in this school. Put back evolution.
Yeah. World has been overrun. by magic men,
And all of the scientists are like, I'm sorry, guys.
hey, they're all like salty and
We
upset.
found the skeleton of a wizard,
And
and
we
what are we supposed to do?
who else was gonna connect those dots? It's gonna be the U.S. or nobody.
But like just focusing then on an embryo, on a single person. Um, I don't know then what you necessarily mean by technicality, because it seems to me to be just about as similar of a starting on as it could be when it comes to like the relative details of what we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I understand what you're saying. You could definitely see the similarities between the two, and I'm just trying to find reasons to why that's not true.
It's
You know what I mean? That's like
it's
the goal.
that's the thing. That's the thing is like that is the crux of this is it's very difficult to put rationally, but like it is so intuitively true that we are conscious and we are creative, and AI can't be. It can't be. Thermostats could not possibly make uh like the Mona Lisa. Like no matter how much the Onion tells me. Um,
Yeah.
but that I mean that unless there is like something that we can actually find by um, looking at the brain, then it all comes down to theories. And that's one of the big things when it comes to theory of the mind is um, if I think that a comatose person is conscious and you think that a comatose person is unconscious, and we're looking at like data from um, neuroscans, right? And so like they're holding up pictures of trees and dogs, and these things are lighting up or not lighting up, and from that data we both come to different theories. We both reasonably can come to different theories. We can have reasons for coming to those theories, but we can't we can't come to a consensus by just saying look at the data harder, look at the data more. Like the data is there, whether or not that comatose person is conscious, whether or not a lot of these theories of the mind are true, come down to the theories themselves. Um, and so, like, when it comes to functionalism, that's true. When it comes to um, thinking about AI as being conscious, that's true. But there's not going to be like you can't take apart an AI and point to something more and say, well, look at that. That
Yeah.
obviously means.
I think there'll have to be a detail with research in either the human brain or AI
Hmm.
that will that'll add for a more permanent solution
Yeah.
to this.
Yeah. But otherwise, it's a very interesting topic, I think.
Well, yeah, and I think it's fun. It's fun to get your mind just mutilated by an idea. You know what I mean? To go through and have someone just like walk you down. Like, yeah, no, you're gonna think that, right? But what about that though? And then you're like, oh. Ooh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's difficult for a lot of people to accept that kind of that
Yeah.
kind of conversation to where it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
you
That's
got you
the
got to you got to
thing.
bring yourself out
It's
of it for a
so
second.
it's so scary um because if you're coming into the conversation with this idea that like I know the truth of the matter, um, and then like the whole idea of the conversation, this philosophical conversation, is to get to a truth. It's so scary if you get to a truth that's
Yeah,
not
that's not. Yeah,
that doesn't cohere
yeah, because
with
you have to jump off your
yours.
truth first, and
Right.
take that whole journey to like
It's
somewhere
super
else.
scary.
Which is kind of segues into the next conversation.
Okay.
You had mentioned last podcast that you had become pescatarian.
Okay,
I
yeah.
would love to talk about that and see what is that like? Why, like, what
Yeah.
brought you there? Like, why did you do that?
Um, I had a really close. So here's the thing that happened for me is I had a really close friend who was vegetarian, was vegan, came to Iowa, that no longer was applicable, became vegetarian, very reasonably so. Um, and I thought that that was a really admirable thing, um, just because like of the regular reasons we think about. So, factory farming is like bad for a lot of reasons, the environment, animal suffering, whatnot, and those vague reasons in my mind. And so I thought that was really admirable. Um, and so I stopped eating red meat. And I knew this about myself. I knew that if I cut cold turkey, I would never do it. So it took like a year and a half to get from
Hey, yeah.
cutting red meat to cutting poultry. It's been about a year that I've cut poultry. Um, so I have like 6 months left, 6 beautiful months having fish and shrimp. Um, and then I'm planning on cutting that too. Um, but that is
And so it's kind of
the
some of
original reason.
so it's kind of some of the more well-known reasons why you're doing it, or did you what did the conversation look like that?
Yeah, so we actually had a veganism talk in philosophy club for one of our topics. Um, and like it comes down to whether or not we put or how much moral worth we put onto animals. So there are like rights that we have, and that kind of measures moral worth. So this isn't a good example, but uh, we as people over 18 have the right to vote. And so we have more moral worth than a child. Um, and so that means that we can, morally speaking, murder children. Um, no, I don't know.
Clip that. So did someone get that or
What did I say that out loud? Blacked out for a
yeah.
second.
Sorry. Wait, where am I?
No, but like when we talk about those rights, we obviously don't want to give the right to vote to a dog or a pig or a cow or anything like that. Um, and um, but we do want to think about like, well, what gives us the more enough moral worth to be alive? So it might be something like there might be an intrinsic value to life, or there is this uh, aversion of suffering. So if I have the ability to suffer, I have moral worth because I then would have this right to not have to suffer unnecessarily, right? And so kind of no matter where you go, unless, and there are other ways to justify eating meat, but like unless you're willing to avert from like all of those theories of value, um, then it kind of becomes untenable to eat meat. And there is this other thing though, which is practicality. So for me, in this example, it is not practical for me to go cold turkey on meat, even though that might be the most moral thing to do.
Mhm.
And it might not be practical for a lot of people in like, I don't know, Africa or some like impoverished parts of America or something like that, where they need protein in the diet. They don't have the resources to buy these plant-based alternatives. Um, And so those are other moral considerations to think about. But for me, I'm lucky enough where I can get to a place where I'm not eating meat anymore. And so, yeah, that's kind of the deal.
No, no, and I think that makes sense. What kind of reaction do you get when you say that to people?
I don't, well, I don't I don't usually get much of a reaction other than like, "Hey, you want some pizza?" And then I'm like, there's pepperoni on that, so no." And they're like, "Oh my God, I didn't know. I was a vegetarian for 2 years myself, so I get it."
Oh, yeah, some of those responses that kind of make you
Yeah,
go,
yeah, where, that's cool.
yeah,
Um, that's the other thing too is like I I have never thought like, "Oh man, you eat meat? You're not as moral as I am." But I do have this like feeling that because of the circumstance that we're in, if you can eat less meat, that's probably just gonna be a good thing to do for, the earth and making it uh, uh, uh,
putting your kill count a little lower.
yeah, you know, uh, you have all of those kids racking it
As
up,
yeah,
and so
yeah.
you don't want to overflow with all of these cows that you're murdering.
Hmm. Yeah. You don't want to
Yeah,
go into the quad digits on the scoreboard.
yeah,
You know what
and
I
so
mean?
it's like there are ethical decisions to be made outside of just eat meat bad.
Yes.
So like I don't know, if you're able to find farm something GMO free, I don't know,
Yeah.
any of that sort of stuff, but like
Like
bad
there's
stuff.
levels to how bad it can be
Sure.
and how good it can
But
be,
it's
and
not
to request
even
perfection
thinking
and just to just be better.
that's true, but even thinking of it as levels is a little bit disingenuous because it's just it's going to have to come down to intent. So it's going to have to come down to, well, I'm trying. I'm putting in an effort. And that is aces. That's
Yeah.
good. And if you're not putting in an effort, that's fine too. It's just a matter of like where your priorities are, what your rationales are. Um, but then there are a lot of people which very fair intentionally don't think about it. So intentionally avoid the conversation. And there are a lot of people who engage in this conversation and come to the same conclusion and still eat meat. And that's just a very natural thing. It's like humans are complex, humans are imperfect, and that's fine.
Hmm.
Um, we aren't rational beings most of the time.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of like the difference between like the president, someone who thinks about like philosophy, and someone who like someone who spends time thinking about other things. You know what I mean?
Oh
It's
yeah,
like
no,
it's
because
within your story arc to think about
yeah,
the morality
it's
of
it's it's a consequence of not thinking about anything but
yeah.
philosophy.
That's
All of you plebeians who think of other
yeah. Wait,
things.
are you saying you have a job that you go
Are you
to?
saying you have sorry,
Is it a
I
is
can't
it a
pronounce it.
kid?
Friends?
Yeah, yeah. Is that a
Am
social
I
life?
pronouncing that
Did
right?
you say you eat dinner? Nice try. You eat while the sun is out? Sorry, can't do
No,
that.
that's not for me. All
Yeah.
I do is read and think about philosophy. That sounds like a good life to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, when if you think about things, it's a matter of time before you start thinking about other things, and like there are only so many things that you can think about, and there are an infinite number of things to think about, but it's kind of on a track, and if you're constantly thinking about things, you're more likely to think about more obscure things than other things. So
That was a lot of things, I gotta
yeah.
say.
What I'm saying is it makes sense that um it makes sense that people don't think about it,
Mm-hmm.
and people choose not to think about it
Yeah,
because some people don't like thinking, and the fact that you like thinking more than other people would obviously lead you to be more likely to think about it.
possibly. Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
I thinking and things.
Yeah,
That's
the
yeah.
two
Yeah, yeah,
big
yeah.
th words.
I would tend to agree with you on that.
Yeah, and as far as the vegetarian um, vegetarian thing, it is. I think it's just refreshing to have a conversation because kind of like I had a conversation with the Atheist and Agnostic Society, the president of that, and
Yeah, I saw that
he
one.
was very chill, very good guy, and I think what a lot of people expect is that stereotype of like we talked about, angry atheist. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right, right.
And it's kind of the same thing with vegans. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You expect to have like this conversation where they're
Yeah.
like,
Snobby.
yeah, and loud and
Yeah. Well, that is an interesting thing. That's a little. It's interesting because it works in both cases where um, there's an implicit thing that's being said, and it's not actually being said, but in the minds of those who are listening, it's being said. So, like, if I offer somebody a beer at a party and somebody's like, "I don't drink," no thanks. They're so like in a lot of people's heads, immediately it's like, you think you're better than me.
yes, that's what I was gonna get at with
If
the
so, like, if you're doing that and you're saying that you're a good person, what does that make me?
because I'm not
And
doing
to
it.
reconcile with that is just so difficult. And so, like, it's a really unhealthy way of thinking.
Everyone has to be the hero of their own story. And
Right.
so with all new information that they receive, they put it through this thing and it's like, okay, if I do it or I think it, then it's a good thing. And if I
Yeah,
don't think it, then it's a bad thing.
obviously.
It's because it's like if it were a good thing, I'd be thinking it.
And obviously, that's not true because it only works for me. But
But
um,
yeah, it makes me a good person.
it's a
But if you
natural
do
it's a
it,
natural mistake that other
yeah,
people.
that other I am completely impervious to stuff like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
So
very that's yeah, it's a very natural thing. I haven't gotten any like, oh man, you're vegetarian,
oh,
you
you're
think
one
you're
of
better than
them.
me.
Yeah.
I think that might just be because it's not, I don't know, 2007 anymore, where like
Well,
there was
yeah.
the snobby vegan who waxed poetic about how meat is murder. Like that's just not really a thing anymore. There are a lot more people. I think this is true of atheism too, where it's just like just a regular person, and also more people interacting with these people, so these stereotypes kind of break down.
Yep.
Um,
And now
yeah,
people can be quieter via like the internet, or they can congregate together more often
sure.
and hash out these conversations. And a good point that that James made when I was talking to him, he said that you kind of start out that way because you have most people have an animosity towards the what they used to think.
Mhm.
And so they start that way and now they're kind of upset that they used to think that way. And so of course they're going to be loud. Of
Yeah.
course they're going to maybe come off as pretentious or
Hmm.
as this and that. And it's like but you kind of grow out of it. And I'd imagine it's the exact same way with veganism.
Sure.
It's like you were taught your whole life that eating meat is something that you should do, have to do, you know,
Hmm.
all above and beyond. And
Yeah.
so it's like you
It's a
get this
very
new
good
idea.
point. Yeah, I
And
agree.
I thought it was a really, yeah, I agree. I thought it was a really good point. And especially you start to realize that you've been the good guy for your whole life, but you've constantly changed what you've thought. So
Yeah.
it's like at some point I was really wrong about things, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean. And so it's kind of like the same thing
Yeah, yeah.
where you realize it's
That's
like
the other part that's so important is like forgiveness. So like being able to understand that this is a thing that is prevalent in everybody. So having the capacity to forgive people, and obviously there is an extent to that.
yeah, yeah. The
But
killing kids is
well,
almost across the line.
I feel like we've already gone over their moral worth,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think it's still up in the. It's kind of one of those things where we need new information, and then we can decide if killing kids is
Yeah,
bad. But I'm
that's
gonna keep doing it until we
Yeah,
figure that one out.
it's my default. You're really gonna stop.
Yeah, everyone
Um,
does it. You know what I
Everyone
mean?
does it. It's a
So.
natural part of living life. Um, no, but I forgot what I was gonna say, but something to the effect of, um,
Everyone does it, like, or
yeah,
that you gotta have forgiveness.
having empathy, having this compassion to try and understand people, and you can still pass judgment on them. You can still bar them from doing stuff. You can still say that what they did was atrocious or something like that. But to be able to like accept people who are genuinely trying to be better people or trying to change is an important thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we'll probably end it on that note
Yeah.
as a good end of.
And this has been the Teletubbies. This has been
Yeah. We'll be back. This was Elijah Moore and oh no, oh, damn, what's the Disney Channel? It's like
dun,
and I'm
dun,
Elijah Moore
dun.
and this is Disney Channel. And they do like the yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they do the yeah, so well, come back to another episode on 7/8 Central of Teen Titans Go. We'll now go to Adult Swim.
Oh man, I wish.
Of
Imagine this
Amazing World of
podcast
Gumball.
in between Teen Titans Go and Amazing World of Gumball.
What
I
a
love
what a
that.
fan cast right there.
Oh yeah, big time.
But yeah, I think I want to hear. I promised I would not end episodes with I want to do another because there will come an episode where I don't. And
Yeah,
but
and
just I don't
yeah.
want to do another, so.
No, I also wanted. No, I fucked it up.
Wait. Cut the
Oh,
tapes.
man,
Cut the tapes.
I don't not want it.
You
I
know,
did it again.
it just to get me out, just be less confusing. Just don't have me on another. I don't want to cause this much confusion for the audience again. So
You know what? In fact, we'll make sure of this. I'll take over the show. I'm sorry, this is the
actually,
last time.
you're probably the confusing one. You should probably get out of here. But it was great having you,
yeah.
James. Not James. God, I was thinking of James Stanford, the atheist anonymous guy. It was good having you, Michael.
Yeah, no, we have become one.
Yeah, honestly, every person just congests into the same person.
I think that is the Teletubbies method.
Yeah,
that we're
yeah,
gonna
consuming.
put out. We are all one. Get into the hive or get out.
Yeah, get into the spotlight hive. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Once they leave, I hand them their 100, and then they stay here until I come back.
Exactly.
Anyway, it was nice having you, Michael. Do
Yeah,
you
of
have
course.
any plugs you want to do?
Come to Philosophy Club if you want. It's pretty easy to find on Stew.org. Otherwise, yeah. Thanks for listening to my podcast.
Yeah.
The Michael Experience.